Tonight, we venture into the deepest shadows of Tamriel, where whispers echo through empty corridors and the smell of incense mingles with the scent of blood. Tonight, we tell the story of the Dark Brotherhood, an organization as old as murder itself, as timeless as the darkness that waits at the edge of every flickering candle. But to understand the Brotherhood, you must first understand the void. In the beginning, there was the void, long before the world took shape, before the mountains rose and the seas filled their basins. There existed two primordial forces locked in eternal opposition. Anu, the everything, representing order and stasis and permanence, and Padme, the nothing, embodying chaos and change and the endless dark between the stars. From their conflict, all things were born. But Padme had another name, whispered in hushed tones by those who knew the old ways. Sithis. Not a god, not truly. Not something you could pray to or bargain with in any conventional sense. Sithis is the representation of the void itself, the primordial chaos that existed before creation and will endure long after the last star has burned out. Sithis is change made manifest, entropy given consciousness, the inevitable end that awaits all things. Where the Aedra and Daedra shape and influence, Sithis simply is. The void does not ask, it does not bargain. It simply waits, patient and eternal, for all things to return. And the Dark Brotherhood serves as its hand in the mortal world. Imagine the silence that comes after a final breath, the stillness that settles over a room when the last heartbeat fades. That is Sithis. That is what the Brotherhood worships, not out of fear or madness, but out of a profound understanding that death is not cruelty. Death is purity. Death is the moment when all illusions dissolve and only truth remains. To the Brotherhood, every assassination is a sacrament, every contract a prayer, every blade that finds its mark sends another soul into the welcoming embrace of the void, fulfilling the ancient and inexorable purpose of all living things. In a world of constant conflict and competing faiths, the Dark Brotherhood offers a simple certainty. In the end, we all return to the darkness from which we came, but they were not always called the Dark Brotherhood. Their story begins much earlier, in the shadowed halls of another organization, an older organization, one whose roots stretch back to the First Era, when the Dunmer still called themselves Chimera and the world was young. Chapter 1. From the Ashes of the Morag Tong. In the beginning, there was only the Morag Tong. The name means Forester's Guild in the Dark Elven tongue, though their work had nothing to do with trees or timber. They were assassins, certainly, but they were more than that. They were a religious order dedicated to Mephala, the Daedric prince of lies, secrets, and murder. The web spinner, they called her, the one who delighted in the tangled webs of conspiracy and betrayal that define mortal politics. The Morag Tong was ancient, even when the world was young. Operating openly in Morrowind, they performed what they called writs of execution, legal assassinations sanctioned by the great houses and the tribunal itself. When a Dunmer noble wished to eliminate a rival without the messy business of open warfare, they hired the Morag Tong. When political tensions threatened to erupt into bloodshed that would destabilize the province, the Tong provided a solution. A blade in the dark, a body cooling in some forgotten alley, problem solved. For centuries, this arrangement worked. The Morag Tong maintained strict neutrality, accepting contracts from any house willing to pay, bound by their religious devotion to Mephala and their code of honor. They were not mere killers. They were instruments of balance, preventing the great houses from tearing each other and all of Morrowind apart. But in the year 324 of the Second Era, everything changed. The Morag Tong assassinated Versidue Shai, the Akaviri potentate who ruled the empire after the fall of the Raymond dynasty. It was a bold move, a high-profile killing that sent shockwaves across Tamriel. The assassins made sure everyone knew who was responsible, signing the walls in the potentate's own blood, Morag Tong. The Night Mother, the leader of the Morag Tong at that time, took credit for the deed, but the price for such audacity was steep. The Tong, once tolerated and even grudgingly accepted, suddenly found themselves hunted, outlawed in Cyrodiil, outlawed across most of the empire. Their sanctuaries were raided, their members scattered or killed. The organization that had thrived for millennia was brought to the brink of extinction outside of Morrowind. And in the chaos that followed, a woman emerged, a Dunmer woman whose name has been lost to time, though her legend endures. She claimed to hear the voice of Sithis himself. According to the most widely accepted account, this woman lived in a small village where the city of Bravil now stands, in the imperial province of Cyrodiil. She had been part of the Morag Tong, but after the potentate's assassination and the persecution that followed, she began to question the old ways. Mephala had brought them glory, yes, but also ruin. The web spinners' games had made them targets. What they needed was not a patron who delighted in schemes and deception, but something older, something purer. They needed Sithis. The Dread Father, she claimed, had spoken to her in the silence of the night. He was displeased with the Morag Tong's failure, with their inability to survive in the new world that was taking shape. The Void, he told her, was hungry for souls. It was her destiny to set things right, to create something new from the ashes of the old. And so, Sithis came to her, according to legend, and gave her 5 children. What happened next is the stuff of nightmare and scripture, depending on who tells the tale. The woman followed through with what she claimed was Sithis's ultimate plan. One night, in a ritual that would echo through the centuries, she murdered her 5 children. She sent their souls directly to the Void, directly to their father, as an offering and a promise. When the villagers learned what she had done, they were horrified. This was not sanctioned murder, not a writ or a contract. This was infanticide, pure and simple, an atrocity beyond comprehension. They rallied against her, a mob driven by grief and rage. They burned down her house with her still inside. But death was not the end for this woman. 30 years passed. The village moved on, forgot. And then, one night, a man heard her voice, a whisper in the darkness, clear and undeniable. She spoke to him of Sithis, of the Void, of a new purpose and a new path. This man, whose name is also lost to history, became the first listener, and the woman who had sacrificed everything, who had given her own children to the darkness, became the Night Mother. Under her guidance, the Dark Brotherhood was born. The Brotherhood took what had been useful from the Morag Tong, the structure, the discipline, the understanding that murder could be art, and transformed it. They abandoned Mephala in favor of Sithis. They rejected the concept of legal writs in favor of a darker ritual, the Black Sacrament, through which anyone, no matter how powerless or desperate, could summon their services. They spread beyond Morrowind, establishing sanctuaries across Tamriel, building a network of assassins who answered to no law, no king, no government, only to the Night Mother, only to the void. The Morag Tong would endure in Morrowind, maintaining their legal status and their worship of Mephala. But they had been surpassed. The Dark Brotherhood was something new, something terrible, something that would become one of the most feared organizations in all of Tamriel. And it all began with a mother's terrible sacrifice and the voice of the void speaking in the darkness. Chapter 2. The 5 Tenets and the Black Sacrament. Every organization needs structure, rules to live by, codes to follow, boundaries that separate order from chaos. For a guild of assassins who worshipped entropy itself, this might seem contradictory. But the Dark Brotherhood understood something fundamental. True chaos is not the absence of rules. True chaos is the deliberate subversion of the expected, the breaking of promises, the betrayal of trust. And so, they created the 5 Tenets. These were not suggestions or guidelines. They were absolute laws, carved into the very foundation of the Brotherhood's existence, binding every member from the lowest initiate to the highest speaker of the Black Hand. To break even one was to invoke the wrath of Sithis himself. Tenet the first. Never dishonor the Night Mother. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Sithis. She was their spiritual leader, their connection to the void. Her voice, speaking through the ages, guided the Brotherhood's hand. To dishonor her was to reject the very purpose of their existence. Tenet the second. Never betray the Dark Brotherhood or its secrets. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Sithis. Trust is everything when your family consists of professional killers. What happens in the sanctuary stays in the sanctuary. What you learn about your brothers and sisters goes with you to the grave. Betrayal meant death, swift and absolute. Tenet the third. Never disobey or refuse to carry out an order from a Dark Brotherhood superior. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Sithis. The chain of command existed for a reason. From the listener who heard the Night Mother's whispers, to the speakers who arranged contracts, to the assassins who carried them out, everyone had a role. Disobedience shattered that structure. Tenet the fourth. Never steal the possessions of a dark brother or dark sister. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Sithis. Among a group of people who killed for coin, theft would seem almost quaint. But the Tenets understood human nature. Greed breeds resentment. Resentment breeds conflict. The Brotherhood was a family, and families do not steal from each other. Tenet the fifth. Never kill a dark brother or dark sister. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Sithis. The ultimate rule, the ultimate prohibition. You could kill emperors. You could slaughter entire families. You could drown cities in blood. But you could never, ever raise a blade against your own family. To do so was to tear at the very fabric of what made the Brotherhood strong. Break any of these tenets, and you would face the consequences. Sometimes that meant expulsion. Sometimes it meant a visit from one of your brothers or sisters, blade in hand, carrying out the will of Sithis. And sometimes, when an entire sanctuary became corrupted, when the rot went too deep to cut away, the Brotherhood would enact what they called a purification. Every member of that sanctuary would die, killed by one of their own, in a ritual cleansing meant to restore balance. But the tenets alone were not enough. The Brotherhood needed contracts, needed targets, needed to know whose souls the void was hungry for. And so they created the Black Sacrament. Picture it, dreamer. A desperate soul driven by grief or rage or an injustice too great to bear. Someone who who has lost everything and wants only one thing: revenge. They perform the ritual in secret, in the dead of night, in a cellar or an abandoned room where no one will interrupt. They create an effigy of their victim. Not a simple doll, but something made from real body parts. A human heart, still sticky with blood. A skull, empty and staring. Bones and flesh arranged in mockery of life. They place candles around this grotesque creation, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Then comes the dagger. They rub its blade with the petals of nightshade, that deadly flower that grows in darkness. And they stab the effigy again and again, whispering the words that have been passed down through generations, the prayer that summons the Brotherhood. Sweet mother, send your child unto me. For the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. And somewhere, far away, the Night Mother hears. She whispers to her listener, the one soul in all the Brotherhood who can hear her voice. The listener informs the speaker. The speaker seeks out the person who performed the ritual, arranges payment, draws up the contract, and then an assassin receives their orders. A name, a location, a target. The Black Sacrament was genius in its simplicity. Unlike the Morag Tong's writs, which required wealth and political connections, the sacrament could be performed by anyone: a beggar, a child, someone with nothing left to lose. As long as they could gather the components and speak the words, the Night Mother would hear, and the Dark Brotherhood would answer. This combination, the rigid structure of the 5 tenets and the democratic accessibility of the Black Sacrament, made the Brotherhood unlike anything else in Tamriel. They were not merely hired killers. They were priests of death, serving a higher purpose, guided by an immortal spirit who had sacrificed everything to bring them into being. They were, in their own eyes, the most honest organization in the world. They promised only one thing: that those who crossed certain lines, who made themselves targets through their actions, would face the consequences. And they always kept their promises. But there was one more element that made the Brotherhood truly terrifying. One more weapon in their arsenal that set them apart. Not just human or mer assassins, but something else. Something bred from birth to kill, without mercy or hesitation. Chapter 3. The Shadow Scales. Argonia's gift to Sithis. In the deep swamps of Black Marsh, where the histories tower over fetid waters, and the air itself seems alive with ancient purpose, the Argonians follow traditions that predate the Empire, predate even the First Era. They are a people connected to something older than recorded history, guided by sentient trees that share a collective consciousness, that whisper truths in the sap that flows through Argonian veins. And among their many strange customs, perhaps none is more unsettling than the tradition of the shadow scales. The constellation of the shadow hangs in the night sky of Tamriel, a 5-starred arrangement that depicts a cloaked, shadowy figure. Those born under this sign are said to possess an uncanny ability to hide, to move unseen, to vanish into darkness as if they were never there. For most races, being born under the shadows simply means a certain aptitude for stealth. For Argonians, it means something far more profound. Every Argonian hatchling born under the sign of the shadow is taken from their parents. Not stolen, not kidnapped, but given willingly, ceremonially, to the Dark Brotherhood. This is the way it has always been. This is the agreement forged in ages past between the rulers of Black Marsh and the servants of Sithis. From the moment they can walk, these children are trained. The Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in Black Marsh becomes their home, their family, their entire world. They learn to kill before they learn to read. They master poison before they master politeness. They are shaped, molded, transformed into perfect instruments of death. These are the shadow scales. The Argonians revere Sithis in their own way, seeing him as the original creator, the force of change and renewal that works in harmony with the Hist. To them, the shadow scales are not victims or sacrifices, but honored servants, chosen by destiny to carry out sacred work. The shadow scales themselves follow the 5 tenets, like any Dark Brotherhood member, but they have additional rules, a code within a code. A shadow scale cannot kill another shadow scale, even if that shadow scale has left the Brotherhood. To do so is considered heresy of the highest order, punishable by death from the royal court of Argonia itself. Shadow scales who survive to adulthood can choose to remain with the Brotherhood or return to Black Marsh to serve their people directly. Many become personal assassins to Argonian leaders, spies, and enforcers operating with complete immunity in their homeland. They are, in every sense, the perfect assassins. No hesitation, no mercy, no moral qualms. They were raised to kill, and killing is all they know. Throughout the Third Era, shadow scales formed the elite core of the Dark Brotherhood. Names like Tainava and Ochiva would become legendary within the Brotherhood, twins who served with distinction in the Cheydinhall Sanctuary. They were efficient, professional, utterly loyal. When a shadow scale accepted a contract, the target was already dead. It was simply a matter of time. But the tradition could not last forever. In the waning years of the Third Era and into the Fourth, the Dark Brotherhood began to decline. Sanctuaries fell, members died, resources dwindled, and in Black Marsh, the training facility at Archon, where generation after generation of shadow scales had been molded into weapons, fell into disrepair. There was no money to maintain it, no members to staff it, no contracts to justify its existence. The last shadow scale hatchlings were trained, and when they came of age and left Archon's crumbling halls, there were no more to take their place. By the time of the Dragon Crisis in the year 201 of the Fourth Era, only one shadow scale remained, an Argonian named Vizara, serving in the last Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in all of Tamriel. He would tell anyone who asked, with a mixture of pride and sorrow, "I am the last of my kind. My order is extinct." The tradition that had produced some of the deadliest assassins in Tamrielic history was over. The agreement between Black Marsh and the Brotherhood, forged in ancient times, had been broken by neglect and circumstance. No more would Argonian hatchlings be given to the darkness. No more would the shadow scales walk the hidden paths. But before their end came the Brotherhood's height, the Third Era, when the shadow scales were many and strong, when the Dark Brotherhood itself stood at the pinnacle of its power, feared and respected across all of Tamriel. Those were the golden years, the time before the fall. Chapter 4, The Height of Power, the Third Era. The Third Era began with blood. In the year 41, just 4 decades after Tiber Septim had unified Tamriel under his rule and founded the Third Empire, his grandson and heir, Pelagius I, was assassinated. The Dark Brotherhood claimed responsibility. They always did. And with that single death, they sent a message to every king, every noble, every person of power across the continent. No one was safe, not even the Emperor's own family. This was the Brotherhood, at its height. Sanctuaries dotted the map like dark pearls on a string. Cheydinhal in Cyrodiil, Wayrest in High Rock, Bravil, where the Night Mother's tomb lay beneath the statue of the lucky old lady, Black Marsh, where the shadow scales were trained, unnamed hideouts scattered across Tamriel, safe houses and bolt holes known only to the Brotherhood itself. The organization operated with a structure that had been refined over centuries. At the top sat the Night Mother, eternal and incorporeal, speaking her will to the one individual chosen to hear her voice, the listener. The listener, in turn, commanded the Black Hand, a council of 5 elite members, 4 speakers, each responsible for 1 or more sanctuaries, and the listener who sat at the hand center, the thumb to their 4 fingers. Each speaker had a personal assassin known as a silencer, someone they trusted absolutely to handle their most dangerous and sensitive contracts. Below the silencers came the sanctuary members themselves, ranked according to skill and experience: murderer, slayer, eliminator, assassin, executioner. This hierarchy ensured the contracts flowed smoothly from the Night Mother to the listener, to the speakers, to the sanctuaries, where individual assassins would carry them out. It was an elegant system proven over time, adaptable to changing circumstances, and the contracts came constantly. Jealous nobles wanting rivals eliminated, merchants seeking to remove competition, jilted lovers craving revenge, heirs impatient for their inheritance. The Brotherhood did not judge. They did not ask if the target deserved to die. They simply performed the Black Sacrament, heard the Night Mother's whisper, arranged payment, and carried out the contract. Sometimes their targets were truly wicked people, corrupt officials, violent criminals, those who abused power and caused suffering. Other times, the targets were innocent, good people caught in someone else's vendetta. The Brotherhood killed them all with equal efficiency, because to them, it was never personal, it was business, it was religion, it was service to Sithis, the void that awaited all mortal souls eventually. The Brotherhood simply hurried the process along. During the events known as the Warp in the West, in the year 417 of the Third Era, the Brotherhood was everywhere, operating openly in some cities, whispered about in others, but always present, always watching. Guards knew about them but rarely interfered, either through bribery or fear or simple pragmatism. Why chase shadows when those shadows could just as easily chase you? Interestingly, during the early Third Era, some Brotherhood sanctuaries still paid homage to Mephala rather than Sithis, a remnant of their Morag Tong origins. But over time, this changed. By the time of the Oblivion Crisis, Sithis reigned supreme as their patron, and the Night Mother's authority was absolute. The Brotherhood also developed relationships with other organizations. The Thieves Guild, for instance, sometimes collaborated with them on jobs requiring both stealth and murder. In the Second Era, according to some accounts, the Night Mother herself had been a member of the Thieves Guild before founding the Brotherhood. True or not, the two groups maintained a wary respect, sometimes cooperating, sometimes competing, but rarely coming into direct conflict. But perhaps the most important development of the Third Era was the solidification of the Black Hand's power. The 5 members who composed this ruling council were the Brotherhood's true leadership, operating in absolute secrecy. Most sanctuary members never met a speaker face to face. Dead drops, anonymous orders, cryptic messages delivered in the night. This was how the Hand maintained control while remaining invisible. In the province of Cyrodiil, during the final years of the Third Era, the Black Hand consisted of the listener Ungolim, a wood elf who lived quietly in the town of Bravil, making regular pilgrimages to commune with the Night Mother. His 4 speakers included Lucien Lechance, an Imperial who oversaw the Cheydinhal Sanctuary and would become one of the most famous Dark Brotherhood members in history. Lechance represented everything the Brotherhood aspired to be: intelligent, ruthless, completely devoted to the Night Mother and the old ways. He recruited promising killers, guided them through the ranks, carried out the will of Sithis without question. His sanctuary was one of the most successful in Tamriel, producing skilled assassins who carried out contracts across the province. And then, in the year 433 of the Third Era, everything began to unravel. The hero of Kvatch, whose deeds would shape the fate of Tamriel during the Oblivion Crisis, committed their first murder. Perhaps it was justified, perhaps not. But the Dark Brotherhood noticed, and Lucien Lechance paid them a visit in the night, offering membership in the most feared organization in the world. What followed would expose a cancer at the heart of the Brotherhood, a betrayal so profound that it would cripple the organization for generations. A man named Mathieu Bellamont, driven by a 20-year obsession with revenge, had infiltrated the Black Hand itself, and he was about to tear it apart from within. The Golden Age was ending, the Fall was beginning, and blood would run like rivers before it was over. Chapter 5. The Fall begins, Oblivion Crisis, and Bellamont's betrayal. Let me tell you about Mathieu Bellamont, dreamer. About what happens when grief curdles into madness, and madness into patient, meticulous revenge. He was young when it happened, just a boy, hiding beneath his bed in a small house in Cyrodiil, listening to his parents argue about something he couldn't quite understand. His father had left. His mother raised him alone. They were poor, but they had each other. That was enough. Until the night Lucien Lechance came. Mathieu's father, bitter and vengeful, had performed the Black Sacrament, had called upon the Dark Brotherhood to murder his former wife. The Night Mother heard. Lechance received the contract, and in the darkness of a Cyrodiil evening, he entered their home. From his hiding place beneath the bed, young Mathieu watched as the speaker beheaded his mother, watched her head roll across the floor, coming to rest facing him, her eyes still open, staring into his. He did not scream. He did not move. He simply burned the image into his memory, let it sear itself into his soul. That night, a child died. What crawled out from under that bed was something else entirely. Mathieu spent the next 20 years planning, not recklessly, not in a blind rage, but with the cold precision of someone who understood that revenge required patience. If he wanted to destroy Lucien Lechance, he needed to get close. If he wanted to destroy the Dark Brotherhood itself, he needed to join them. So he killed his father, tore out the man's heart with his bare hands, the first step in his long journey. The Night Mother noticed this act of hatred, disguised as devotion. The Brotherhood recruited him, and Mathieu proved to be an exceptional assassin, skilled, dedicated, completely loyal, or so they thought. He rose through the ranks, murderer to slayer to eliminator to assassin. His fellow Brotherhood members trusted him, saw him as family. Lucien Lechance himself recommended Mathieu when another speaker needed a new silencer. The boy who had watched his mother die was now a member of the Black Hand, the ruling elite. one of the 10 most powerful figures in the Brotherhood. And that's when he began his work. The Black Hand used dead drops to communicate, hidden locations where speakers would leave orders for their silencers, who would then carry out contracts without ever meeting face to face. It was a security measure, a way to ensure that if one member was captured or killed, they couldn't betray the others. Bellamont started switching the orders. He would follow LeChance to the dead drop locations, wait until the speaker had left, then replace LeChance's orders with his own. The contracts he created were designed to do one thing: kill members of the Black Hand. He sent LeChance's silencer, the hero of Kvatch, to murder speakers, other silencers, eventually even the listener himself. But the beauty of Bellamont's plan was its subtlety. When Black Hand members started dying, all evidence pointed to LeChance. It was his silencer carrying out the kills, his dead drops that were compromised, his sanctuary that had obviously been infiltrated by a traitor. The Black Hand moved swiftly. LeChance was ordered to purify his own sanctuary in Cheydinhal, to kill everyone there in the hope of eliminating whoever was feeding information to their enemies. The hero of Kvatch, still believing they were following LeChance's orders, murdered everyone. Tainava and Ochiva, the Shadow Scale twins, Antoinetta Marie, Vicente Valtieri, Muraidar, Gogron, Gro Bolmog. All of them died in a single night, but the traitor survived because the traitor was never there to begin with. When Black Hand members continued to die even after the purification, suspicion fell entirely on LeChance. He had ordered the deaths of his own sanctuary, yet the killings continued. Obviously, he was the one responsible. The remaining members of the Black Hand hunted him day and night, eventually tracking him to a farmstead called Applewatch. They found him first. When the hero of Kvatch arrived at Applewatch with evidence that would clear LeChance's name, they found the speaker's naked, mutilated corpse hanging from the ceiling. The 4 remaining Black Hand members, Arquin, Banus Arlo, Belisarius Arius, and Mathieu Bellamont himself, had tortured and killed him. During the assault, Arquin had even feasted on LeChance's entrails, but LeChance had died proclaiming his innocence, and shortly after, the evidence proved him right. The hero traveled to Anvil, to a lighthouse where they discovered something terrible, a basement shrine dedicated to a murdered woman. Her severed head placed reverently on an altar, her body parts scattered around the room, and on a table nearby, a journal written in Mathieu Bellamont's hand. The journal revealed everything: his witness to his mother's murder, his infiltration of the Brotherhood, his switching of the dead drops, his burning hatred for Lucien LeChance, and everything the Brotherhood represented. Page after page of madness and grief and cold, calculated revenge. The remaining Black Hand members, now including the hero as LeChance's replacement, traveled to the Night Mother's tomb in Breville. There, they sought her guidance, asking her to appoint a new listener and restore balance to the Brotherhood. But the Night Mother's response was chilling. She confirmed what they had already learned. Lucien LeChance had been innocent, a loyal servant of Sithis until his dying breath. The Black Hand, she declared, remained tainted by betrayal. Restoration was impossible. Bellamont snapped. "Enough," he screamed. "Enough of this. You will all suffer for the pain you have caused me. I will destroy your Night Mother, and the Dark Brotherhood will fall." He attacked, moving with the skill of a trained assassin, trying to reach the Night Mother's coffin to destroy it. He killed Belisarius Arius and Banus Alor before the hero cut him down, ending his vendetta mere feet from his final goal. In death, the Night Mother forgave him. She even praised his dedication, his unwavering commitment to his mother's memory. But the damage had been done. The Black Hand was shattered. Half its members were dead. The sanctuaries were in chaos. Trust, the foundation upon which the Brotherhood had been built, lay in ruins. The hero of Kvatch became the new listener, given the impossible task of rebuilding what Bellamont had torn apart. But the Brotherhood would never fully recover. This wound went too deep, cut too close to the heart. And the Oblivion Crisis itself, the Daedric invasion that nearly destroyed Tamriel, only made things worse. While cities burned and gates opened to realms of fire, the Brotherhood struggled to maintain its operations. Contracts went unfulfilled. Sanctuaries were abandoned. Members deserted or died. By the time Martin Septim sacrificed himself to seal the gates forever, ending the Third Era and beginning the Fourth, the Dark Brotherhood was a shadow of what it had been. Weakened, scattered, demoralized. But they endured. They always endured. That was their nature. Like Sithis himself, they could not be truly destroyed, only diminished, waiting in the darkness for a chance to rebuild. That chance would not come, because what followed the Oblivion Crisis was something worse. A war that would consume all of Tamriel and bring the Brotherhood to the very brink of extinction. Chapter 6, The Great War and the Long Decline. The Fourth Era began in chaos. With the Septim dynasty ended and the Dragonfires cold, the Empire struggled to maintain control over its provinces. Morrowind, shattered by the Red Year when Red Mountain erupted. Black Marsh, where the Argonians drove out their former Dunmer slavers and closed their borders. Elsewhere, splitting into separate kingdoms. Somerset, withdrawing into isolation. And then came the Aldmeri Dominion. In the year 171 of the Fourth Era, the Thalmor regime in Somerset declared war on the Empire. What followed was 5 years of brutal conflict known as the Great War. Legions clashed across Cyrodiil. Cities were sacked. The imperial city itself fell, was reclaimed, fell again. By the time the White Gold Concordat was signed in 175, ending the war, millions had died. For the Dark Brotherhood, the Great War was a catastrophe. Both sides targeted them. The Empire saw them as a destabilizing force, assassins who might be hired by the enemy. The Dominion considered them a threat to their plans for domination. Brotherhood sanctuaries across Tamriel became targets, not just in Cyrodiil, but in Hammerfell, High Rock. Everywhere the war's shadow fell. One by one, the sanctuaries fell. The details are scarce. The Brotherhood, by its nature, did not keep comprehensive records that outsiders could find. But we know the results. Sanctuaries that had stood for centuries were destroyed in a matter of years. Members were hunted down and killed. Those who survived went into hiding, abandoning the old ways, trying to stay alive in a world that had suddenly become very dangerous. The Night Mother's tomb in Bravil was raided. The listener was killed. The crypt of the Night Mother itself was destroyed by a group of mercenaries in the year 180. With nowhere else to turn, the survivors exhumed the Night Mother's preserved corpse from the ruins and fled. This is where Cicero enters the story, an imperial assassin serving as keeper of the Night Mother's body. Cicero transported her remains across Tamriel in a wagon, searching for sanctuary. He was one of only 2 Dark Brotherhood members known to be operating outside of Skyrim by this time. The other was believed to be a deserter. Cicero's journals paint a picture of increasing desperation. He travelled to the last remaining sanctuary in Cyrodiil, in Cheydinhal, the very place where the purification had occurred during the Oblivion Crisis. But when he arrived, he found it nearly empty. The listener, a woman named Alissane Dupre, was there. A few other members remained, but they were barely surviving, taking whatever contracts they could find just to buy food. There was talk of reopening the Shadow Scale training facility at Archon in Black Marsh, of rebuilding the Brotherhood's strength through that ancient alliance. But they lacked the resources. The tradition died, and with it, the last reliable source of elite assassins the Brotherhood had ever known. A man named Rasha claimed to hear the Night Mother's voice, proclaimed himself the new listener. But when challenged to recite the binding words, something only a true listener would know, he could not do it. Cicero realized the truth. Rasha was a fraud, either delusional or power-hungry, but definitely not chosen by the Night Mother. Cicero killed him. It was murder, yes. It broke the fifth tenet, the absolute prohibition against killing another Brotherhood member. But Cicero believed he was acting righteously, protecting the Night Mother from false prophets and pretenders. He saw himself as the last true believer, the only one who still followed the old ways. With Rasha dead and the Cheydinhal sanctuary on the verge of collapse, Cicero made a decision. He would take the Night Mother north to Skyrim, where rumors spoke of one last sanctuary still operating. The journey was long and dangerous. His wagon broke down near Whiterun, but eventually he reached his destination, the Falkreath Sanctuary, the last Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in all of Tamriel. But what he found there was not the Brotherhood of old. The 5 tenets had been abandoned. The sanctuary operated more like a mercenary company than a religious order. Their leader, a Nord woman named Astrid, claimed authority for herself, not deferring to the Night Mother's will. To Cicero, this was heresy. To Astrid, Cicero was a madman, clinging to outdated traditions that had brought the Brotherhood nothing but ruin. The tension between them would define the Brotherhood's final chapter. Because while Cicero saw himself as protecting the old ways, Astrid believed she was saving the Brotherhood by abandoning them. She had kept her sanctuary alive through pragmatism, not idealism. She followed no tenets, recognized no listener, answered to no one but herself, and for a time it worked. Her sanctuary survived when all others had fallen. Her members were loyal to her, not to some ancient corpse in a coffin or some invisible spirit claiming to speak for Sithis. But survival is not the same as thriving. The Falkreath Sanctuary was a tiny thing, a handful of assassins operating out of a hidden cave, taking whatever contracts they could find through rumor and gossip, rather than the Black Sacrament. They had no structure, no hierarchy beyond Astrid's personal authority. They were, in essence, a street gang that happened to be very good at murder. This was the state of the Dark Brotherhood when the Dragon Crisis began, when dragons returned to Skyrim after thousands of years, when the Dragonborn emerged, blessed by the gods with the power to slay dragons and absorb their souls. And when a child in Windhelm, orphaned and desperate, performed the Black Sacrament in an abandoned house, calling out to the Night Mother for help. The Night Mother, silent for so long, was about to speak again, and everything would change. Chapter 7, Skyrim. the last sanctuary. Close your eyes, dreamer, and picture Windhelm, the ancient stone city of the Nords, built by the first men who crossed the Sea of Ghosts from Atmora. Cold and forbidding, its grey walls rising like monuments to old glory and older grief. In a house in the city's poorest district, a young boy named Aventus Aretino lived alone. His parents were dead. He had been sent to an orphanage in Riften called Honor Hall, run by a woman the children called Grelod the Kind. But Grelod was not kind. She was cruel, harsh, a woman who beat the children in her care and crushed their spirits with contempt and neglect. Aventus escaped, ran away back to his family's empty house in Windhelm, where he found an old book in his parents' belongings. A book that explained how to perform the Black Sacrament. So he tried, a child, maybe 10 years old, gathering bones from the Hall of the Dead, stealing a heart from some fresh corpse, arranging them in his family's basement with trembling hands, stabbing the effigy while reciting words he barely understood. Sweet mother, send your child unto me, for the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. The guards talked about it, the neighbors whispered. Everyone knew what the Aretino boy was doing in that house, knew he was trying to summon the Dark Brotherhood. Some found it amusing, others found it disturbing, but no one took it seriously, except the Night Mother. For the first time in years, she heard the Black Sacrament, and she would have whispered to her listener, would have passed the contract through the proper channels. But there was no listener. Her voice went unheard, lost in the silence of her coffin in that cave near Falkreath. So Astrid and her sanctuary learned about Aventus the old-fashioned way, through rumor, through gossip, through word that some crazy kid was trying to summon them. Enter the Dragonborn, perhaps drawn by curiosity, perhaps by a genuine desire to help a desperate child, perhaps by darker motives. But the Dragonborn traveled to Windhelm, found Aventus in his house, surrounded by candles and bones and the smell of death. The boy explained what he wanted: someone to kill Grelod the Kind, to free the children of Honor Hall Orphanage from her cruelty. And the Dragonborn accepted the contract. It was almost pitifully easy. Grelod was old, unarmed, completely unprepared for violence. One moment, she was berating the children as usual. The next, she was dead on the floor, and the children were cheering. No bounty was issued for the killing. No guards came. Grelod the Kind had been so universally despised that her death was seen as a public service. The Dragonborn returned to Aventus, collected the payment, and forgot about it until 24 hours later they fell asleep, anywhere in Skyrim, in any bed, and when they woke, they were somewhere else, a shack, abandoned, isolated, far from any settlement. 3 people bound to chairs, gagged and terrified, and standing in the shadows, a woman in black armor, watching them with predatory interest. Astrid, leader of the Falkreath Sanctuary. "You stole from us," she said. Simple as that. The Dragonborn had killed Grelod, stolen a contract that should have gone to the Brotherhood. Such theft required payment. A life for a life. Astrid gestured to the 3 prisoners. One of them, she explained, had a contract on their head. One of them had been marked for death by the Black Sacrament. Kill the right one, and the debt would be paid. Kill the wrong one and, well, that would be interesting too. The prisoners each told their story. A Nord warrior who admitted he might have gotten carried away during his time in the Legion. A Dunmer woman exhausted and desperate, just trying to feed her children. A Khajiit thief who boasted about his crimes and threatened the Dragonborn with future violence. Which one had the contract? Astrid didn't say. The choice was the Dragonborn's. And here's the beautiful thing, Dreamer. The cruel joke. It didn't matter. There was no contract. Astrid was testing them, seeing if they had the stomach for murder without justification, without knowledge of guilt or innocence. The prisoners were random people she had grabbed, probably travelers on remote roads who wouldn't be missed. Kill one, kill all three, kill Astrid herself. The Brotherhood's response was the same. If the Dragonborn proved they could kill in cold blood, they were invited to join. If they refused, if they turned on Astrid instead, the Brotherhood would be destroyed. Most, though, made the choice Astrid expected. They killed one or more of the prisoners, proved themselves worthy, and were welcomed into the family. The Falkreath Sanctuary was small, only 7 members besides Astrid, Nazir, a Redguard who managed contracts, Arnbjorn, Astrid's werewolf husband, Babette, an eternally young vampire girl, Festus Krex, an elderly mage, Gabriella, a Dunmer assassin, Vizara, the last shadow scale, and a handful of others. They were not the Dark Brotherhood of legend. They followed no tenets. They acknowledged no Night Mother. They were, essentially, Astrid's personal crew, loyal to her rather than to any ancient tradition. But that was about to change, because Cicero had arrived with the Night Mother's coffin. And though Astrid tolerated his presence, though she allowed the corpse to be placed in the sanctuary's inner chamber, she had no intention of actually listening to it. The Night Mother was a relic, a symbol, nothing more. Except the Night Mother was very much more than that. The Dragonborn was assigned various contracts, simple killings across Skyrim, building reputation, proving themselves. And then came the moment that would change everything. Astrid, suspicious of Cicero's constant whispering to the coffin, ordered the Dragonborn to spy on him, to hide in the Night Mother's coffin and listen to what the Mad Keeper was saying. So the Dragonborn climbed into the coffin, surrounded by the preserved remains of the woman who had founded the Brotherhood over 1,000 years ago. And they waited. Cicero entered, began his ritual, speaking to the Night Mother, begging her to acknowledge him, to name him as listener. "Speak to me, Mother. I'm your faithful keeper. Choose me." But the Night Mother did not speak to Cicero. She spoke to the Dragonborn, her voice, ancient and patient and absolutely real, whispered in the darkness. She had heard the Black Sacrament, not Aventus's plea for Grelard's death. That contract was already fulfilled. But another, a man named Amand Motier, an imperial noble, had performed the ritual in a tomb called Volunrud. He sought the Brotherhood's services for something important. The Dragonborn emerged from the coffin, shaken. Cicero, initially angry at what he thought was defilement of the Night Mother's corpse, suddenly realized what had happened. The Night Mother had spoken. A new listener had been chosen. Not him, despite his years of faithful service, but this newcomer. He was crushed, but also elated. The silence had been broken. The old ways were returning. Astrid was less pleased. She had built this sanctuary, kept it alive when all others fell. She had made herself leader through strength and cunning. And now, some corpse in a box was claiming authority. Now the Dragonborn, a member for maybe a week, was supposedly the listener. She saw this for what it was, a threat to her power, to her control. But she was pragmatic, so she agreed to investigate this contract to see if it was legitimate. If real coin could be made, if real work was to be had, then fine, they would take the job. But she remained leader. The Night Mother's authority meant nothing. The Dragonborn traveled to Vollenrud, met with Amand Motiere, and learned the scope of the contract he proposed. He wanted the Emperor assassinated, not just killed, but assassinated in a way that would shake the Empire to its foundations. A series of murders, each carefully orchestrated, building up to the final strike. And he would pay handsomely for it. This was the kind of contract the Dark Brotherhood of old would have taken with pride, the kind of legendary job that defined an era. Astrid agreed, perhaps seeing it as a way to restore the Brotherhood's reputation, to make them feared once more. She had no idea she was signing all their death warrants. Chapter 8: The Dragonborn's Arrival and Astrid's Betrayal. The contracts began simply enough. Vittoria Vici, the Emperor's cousin, murdered during her own wedding in solitude, her blood spilling onto cobblestones while guests screamed and guards scrambled to respond. A message, loud and clear. No one is safe, not even in the heart of imperial power. Gaius Maro, son of the Penitus Oculatus commander, killed during his inspection tour of Skyrim cities. The security force's own leader's family targeted, demonstrating that the Emperor's protectors could not even protect themselves. These assassinations went as planned. The Dragonborn proved efficient, skilled, worthy of their new status. But tensions in the sanctuary were rising. Cicero, emboldened by the Night Mother's return to prominence, grew more vocal in his criticism of Astrid. He insisted on following the old ways, on respecting the listener's authority, on reinstating the 5 tenets. Astrid saw this as insubordination, as an attempt to undermine her leadership. One night, Cicero snapped. He attacked Astrid, wounding her before Visara intervened, and took the blow instead. Cicero fled to the Dawnstar Sanctuary, an abandoned Dark Brotherhood hideout far to the north. Astrid sent the Dragonborn after him. To kill him, she said, to eliminate this madman who threatened the family. But when the Dragonborn found Cicero in Dawnstar, wounded and cornered, begging for his life, they had a choice: kill him as ordered, or spare him and lie to Astrid about it. The Night Mother, speaking once more, suggested mercy. Cicero was the keeper, after all. His position was sacred. Many chose to let him live. Astrid accepted the lie. The sanctuary returned to an uneasy peace. Meanwhile, the Emperor's assassination moved forward. The Dragonborn infiltrated a ship called the Kataria, fought through its defenders, and finally reached their target. Titus Mede II, Emperor of Tamriel, sitting alone in his cabin. He knew why they were there, had known, probably for some time, that his life was forfeit. He accepted death with dignity, asking only that they kill the person who had arranged his assassination. Not out of revenge, but because a man who would hire assassins to kill an emperor was too dangerous to leave alive. The Dragonborn struck. The emperor died, and Commander Maro of the Penitus Oculatus revealed his hand, because Astrid, terrified by the magnitude of what they had done, had made a deal. She had approached Commander Maro before the Emperor's assassination, offering to reveal the listener's identity in exchange for immunity for the sanctuary. Maro had agreed, promised that if she delivered the Dragonborn to him, he would leave the Brotherhood alone forever. She arranged the ambush perfectly. The Dragonborn, returning from the Emperor's assassination, walked into a trap on the docks of Solitude. Penitus Oculatus agents surrounded them. Maro gloated. The listener was captured or killed, the Brotherhood's most dangerous member eliminated. Except the Dragonborn survived. They fought through the agents, disappeared into the night, and returned to the Falkreath Sanctuary to warn the others. But they were too late. Maro had betrayed Astrid just as she had betrayed her own. He had never intended to honor their agreement. While the ambush was happening in Solitude, his forces had descended on the sanctuary itself. When the Dragonborn arrived, they found the entrance burning. Inside, corpses everywhere. Festus Krex burned to death. Vizara, the last shadow scale, bleeding out from a dozen wounds. Arnbjorn, Astrid's werewolf husband, fought to the last, but was overwhelmed. Gabriella, gone. The sanctuary that had been their home, their family, destroyed in a single violent purge. But 3 had survived. Nazir, who had been out on a contract. Babette, the child vampire, who had hidden when the soldiers came. And the Night Mother, her coffin intact, untouched by the flames. From within that coffin, the Night Mother spoke. She told the Dragonborn where to find Astrid. One last conversation, one final accounting. They found her in what remained of the sanctuary's central chamber, burned, horribly burned, her flesh charred and twisted, barely clinging to life. She could not move, could barely speak, but she was conscious, aware, suffering, and she was sorry. "I betrayed you," she whispered. "Betrayed the Night Mother, betrayed everything I held dear. I thought Maro would leave us alone if I gave him the listener. I thought I could save the family, but I was wrong. I was such a fool." She had violated all 5 tenets, dishonored the Night Mother by refusing to follow her will, betrayed the Brotherhood's secrets to their enemies, disobeyed the Night Mother's commands, stolen from the family by keeping power that wasn't rightfully hers, and gotten her own family members killed, breaking the ultimate prohibition. She had invoked the wrath of Sithis with every choice she made, and so she had performed the Black Sacrament on herself, created a contract, spoken the words, offered her own life as penance. The Dragonborn was to be her assassin, her executioner, the one who would end her suffering and send her to whatever judgment awaited in the void. She handed them the Blade of Woe, the legendary dagger that had belonged to Lucien Lechance, that had passed through generations of Brotherhood members, a weapon symbolic of everything the Brotherhood represented. "You lead the family now," Astrid said. "The old ways were right. The Night Mother was right. I see that now. Do it. Please, end this." The Dragonborn raised the Blade of Woe, and with one mercy stroke, Astrid's suffering ended. She had been a terrible leader in the end, driven by pride and fear to betray everything she claimed to love. But she had also kept the sanctuary alive when all others fell, had given the survivors a home, a purpose, however flawed her vision had been. In the void, perhaps, she would find the peace that had eluded her in life. The Night Mother had one final instruction. Go to Dawnstar, take the survivors, Nazir, Babette, Cicero if he lived, and claim the old sanctuary there. Rebuild the Dark Brotherhood properly this time, following the ancient ways, respecting the traditions that had sustained them for over 1,000 years. The Dragonborn obeyed. The Dawnstar Sanctuary became their new home. Smaller than Falkreath had been, but safer, more remote. They renovated it slowly, using gold from contracts to repair the damage time had inflicted. They recruited new members, carefully, one by one. Initiates who proved their worth, who understood what the Brotherhood truly represented. The 5 tenets were reinstated. The hierarchy was restored. The Dragonborn served as listener, hearing the Night Mother's whispers, passing contracts to the others. Nazir managed the day-to-day operations. Babette handled training. Cicero, if he survived, resumed his duties as keeper, finally at peace now that the old ways had returned. And the contracts came, slowly at first, then more frequently. Word spread that the Dark Brotherhood had survived, that the Black Sacrament still worked, that the Night Mother still heard every desperate prayer spoken in darkness. They would never again reach the heights they had known in the Third Era. Too much had been lost, too many sanctuaries destroyed, too many members killed, too much knowledge forgotten. But they endured. That was enough. That had always been enough. Because the Dark Brotherhood was not truly an organization. It was an idea. The idea that death comes for everyone eventually, that no amount of power or wealth can protect you from the void, that somewhere in the darkness, someone is always listening, and in Skyrim, in a hidden sanctuary beneath the frozen earth, that idea lived on. But this is not where the story ends, dreamer. Because while the Fourth Era Brotherhood struggled to survive in Skyrim, hundreds of years earlier, during the Second Era, the Brotherhood was thriving, and their story during that time reveals truths about their nature that even the Dragonborn never fully understood. Let us turn back the clock. Let us travel to the Gold Coast of Cyrodiil in the year 583 of the Second Era and see the Dark Brotherhood at a very different moment in their long, dark history. Chapter 9. The Gold Coast. A Brotherhood under siege. Second Era was a time of chaos across Tamriel. The Three Banners War raged between the Aldmeri Dominion, the Daggerfall Covenant, and the Ebonheart Pact, each claiming the right to rule the Empire. Molag Bal, the Daedric Prince of Domination, attempted to merge Nirn with his realm of Cold Harbor, threatening all mortal existence. Heroes rose and fell. Alliances shifted like sand. And through it all, the Dark Brotherhood worked. On the Gold Coast, the western shore of Cyrodiil, where the warm waters of the Abetian Sea meet ancient stone, the Brotherhood maintained one of their most important sanctuaries. Here, in a hidden cavern accessible only through secret passages, dozens of assassins trained, planned, and carried out contracts across the region. The sanctuary was led by Astara Corellius, the matron, a woman of iron will and unwavering devotion to the old ways. Above her stood Speaker Tyrrhenus, a member of the Black Hand who oversaw operations on the Gold Coast. Together, they maintained a strong Brotherhood presence, their members including skilled assassins like Green Venom Tongue, a shadow scale who had served for decades, Tanek, a former pirate who had found purpose in the darkness, and others who had pledged themselves to Sithis. Under their leadership, the Gold Coast Sanctuary thrived. Contracts flowed steadily. The Night Mother's will was done. The 5 tenets were followed without question. But something was wrong. Brotherhood members were dying mysteriously. Contracts were being stolen before assassins could complete them. Someone was targeting the family, someone who knew their secrets, their locations, their methods. The sanctuary suspected a traitor, but finding them proved nearly impossible. Whoever was responsible moved like smoke, always one step ahead. Into this tense situation came an outsider, someone who had stumbled upon a Brotherhood contract, who had witnessed a murder they were not supposed to see, Normally, such witnesses were eliminated without hesitation. But Speaker Tyrannus saw potential in this one. Rather than kill them, he offered a choice: join the family or die. A test to see if they could survive, if they had what it took to serve Sithis. This newcomer, the Vestige, as history would remember them, accepted. They were inducted into the sanctuary and immediately thrown into the deep end. Contracts came quickly: a corrupt nobleman in Anvil, a merchant who had betrayed the wrong people. Simple killings at first, then increasingly complex assignments that tested their skills and resolve. The Vestige proved more than capable. They completed every contract with precision and efficiency, earning the respect of veteran members. But the mystery deepened. More brothers and sisters died. More contracts vanished before they could be fulfilled. Astara and the Vestige worked together to investigate. The trail led to a man named Simbar, a Brotherhood member who specialized in poisons. He had been feeding information to someone outside the sanctuary, betraying the second tenet, selling the family's secrets for gold. They found Simbar's body in a torture chamber beneath the At-Himar estate in Kavach, killed by those he had been working with. And there, the Vestige learned the terrible truth. The person orchestrating the attacks on the Brotherhood was not some rival assassin guild or common criminal organization. It was Primate Artorius Ponticus, the head of the Cathedral of Akatosh in Kavach. Artorius was a man of profound faith and equally profound hypocrisy. He publicly condemned the Dark Brotherhood from his pulpit, preaching about their evil, calling them cowards who hid in shadows. But privately, he had used them. Years earlier, he had performed the Black Sacrament himself, summoning the Brotherhood to murder his predecessor, Primate Jonas, so he could take his position. The assassin sent to complete that contract was a woman named Lyra Viria, a troubled member of the Brotherhood who had recently killed her entire sanctuary in a moment of madness. When she came to kill Jonas, Artorius was waiting. He did not run or hide. Instead, he spoke to her of redemption, of purpose, of serving something greater than the void. He converted her. Lyra became the Black Dragon, Artorius's personal assassin, the first sword of the Order of the Hour, the military arm of his church. She abandoned the Brotherhood, turned against her former family, and became the instrument of Artorius's vendetta. Together, they hunted Brotherhood members across the Gold Coast, stealing contracts, murdering assassins, trying to destroy the organization completely. Artorius believed he was doing holy work. In his mind, the Dark Brotherhood represented everything wrong with Tamriel: chaos, murder, the worship of dark forces. He would eliminate them, replace them with his own sanctified killers who served Akatosh instead of Sithis. The irony that he was using murder to fight murderers never seemed to trouble him. The Vestige discovered all of this through investigation, following trails of blood and betrayal across the Gold Coast. They learned Lyra's identity by recovering her journal. They witnessed visions of her conversion through the alchemical skills of Green Venom Tongue. And they realized that to save the Brotherhood, to end this threat once and for all, they would have to strike at the heart of Artorius's power, the Cathedral of Akatosh itself. Speaker Tyrannus gave the order. The entire Gold Coast Sanctuary would participate. They would infiltrate the cathedral through ancient catacombs beneath it, fight their way through Artorius's warrior priests and guards, and kill the primate in his own holy sanctuary. It was audacious, blasphemous, some would say, but it was necessary. The assault began at night. Tanek scouted the entrance to the catacombs, clearing rubble that had blocked the passage. The vestige led the way, with Astara, Green Venom Tongue, Hildegard, Kor, and others following. They fought through the dark tunnels, killed a Wamasu matriarch that had made its nest in the depths, and emerged into the cathedral proper. Primate Artorius was waiting. He stood before the massive stained glass window depicting Akatosh, radiating absolute certainty in his righteousness. His warrior priests surrounded him, ready to die protecting their holy leader. And beside him, invisible until she struck, was the Black Dragon herself. The battle was brutal. Artorius wielded powers granted by his devotion to Akatosh, or so he believed. He could freeze time itself, trapping everyone in place except himself and the vestige, forcing one-on-one confrontations while his soldiers remained locked in temporal stasis. He called down holy fire. He shielded himself with divine barriers, but divine power or not, he was still mortal, still vulnerable to a blade wielded by someone who had dedicated their life to the art of murder. One by one, his defenses fell. His soldiers died. The Black Dragon was defeated. And finally, Artorius himself knelt before the altar of his god, defeated, knowing that his crusade had failed. The vestige approached from behind, took Artorius' own ceremonial staff, and impaled him with it, sending him to whatever judgment awaited beyond death. Astara stood over his body and spoke the words that every brother and sister knew: "To the void with you, Artorius. May the dread Father grant you the welcome you so richly deserve." The threat was ended. The Brotherhood had survived. Speaker Tyrannus promoted the vestige to silencer, making them one of the elite, answering directly to the Black Hand rather than any sanctuary. The Gold Coast Sanctuary was safe once more, its members avenged, its secrets protected. But the lesson remained clear. The Dark Brotherhood had enemies everywhere. Some wore armor and carried swords. Others wore holy vestments and spoke of righteousness. Some were obvious. Others hid behind masks of piety and faith. The Brotherhood survived because they understood something fundamental. Everyone dies. Kings and beggars, priests and heretics, saints and sinners. Death does not care about your station or your faith or your intentions. It comes for everyone eventually. The Brotherhood simply made the arrangements. The Gold Coast Sanctuary would continue to operate successfully for decades after Artorius' death. It would survive the Tiber Wars, survive the transition from Second Era to Third, survive even into the early years of the Oblivion Crisis, before finally falling during the chaos that followed. But their victory over Primate Artorius proved something important. The Night Mother's guidance kept the Brotherhood true. The five tenets kept them from tearing themselves apart. And their devotion to Sithis gave them purpose beyond simple murder. Strip away that purpose, that meaning, and they became nothing more than serial killers in matching outfits. Maintain it, honor it, serve it, and they became something else entirely. Something terrible, yes, something dangerous, but also something with meaning, with structure, with a place in the cosmic order. The Night Mother understood this. That's why she guided them. That's why she spoke to her listeners across the centuries, ensuring that the Brotherhood never strayed too far from its true path. She had sacrificed everything, her children, her life, her very soul, to create this organization. she would not let it be destroyed by those who failed to understand what it truly represented. And so the Brotherhood endured through the Second Era, through the Third, into the Fourth, rising and falling like the tide, but never completely disappearing, never completely defeated, because death is eternal, and so are those who serve it. Chapter 10, Legacy of the Void. Let us return to where we began, dreamer, to the darkness, to the silence, to that moment between heartbeats where the void waits patiently for all things to return. The Dark Brotherhood story spans thousands of years, from the split with the Morag Tong in the Second Era to the desperate survival in Skyrim during the Fourth. It is a story of faith and betrayal, of tradition and innovation, of strict codes violated by the very people who swore to uphold them. But beneath all the intrigue and assassination, beneath the political machinations and personal vendettas, there has always been one constant: Sithis. The void does not change. It does not grow weary or lose faith. It simply is, eternal and patient, the final destination of every living soul. The Dark Brotherhood, in all its iterations, in all its triumphs and failures, has been nothing more than an acknowledgement of that fundamental truth. Death comes for everyone. The Brotherhood simply makes the appointment. Throughout their history, the Brotherhood has operated according to certain principles. The 5 tenets provided structure, ensuring that an organization of killers did not tear itself apart from within. The Black Sacrament provided accessibility, allowing anyone, rich or poor, noble or peasant, to summon their services. The Night Mother provided guidance, her voice speaking across centuries to ensure the Brotherhood remained true to its purpose. But these principles were only as strong as the people who followed them. And people, as we have seen, are fallible. Mathieu Bellamont's revenge nearly destroyed the Brotherhood in Cyrodiil, his patient infiltration exposing the vulnerability of trusting the wrong person. Astrid's pride and fear led her to betray everything she claimed to protect, resulting in the death of her entire sanctuary. Primate Artorius' philosophical confusion turned him from a devoted servant into a mad dog that had to be put down. Yet the Brotherhood survived all of these crises, not through strength or cunning alone, but through adaptability. When the 5 tenets were abandoned, they were eventually reinstated. When sanctuaries fell, new ones were established. When the old ways seemed obsolete, they proved their relevance once more. This adaptability comes from understanding what the Brotherhood truly is. Not an institution, but a manifestation of an eternal force. Sithis does not need the Dark Brotherhood to exist. Death will claim all souls, whether assassins facilitate the process or not. But the Brotherhood provides something important: acknowledgement. They recognize the void's sovereignty, accept death not as tragedy, but as inevitability, and through their work remind the world that no one is immortal, no matter how powerful they become. The famous have always been targets. Pelagius I, assassinated in the 1st century of the Third Era. The potentate Versidue, killed by the Morag Tong on the Brotherhood's behalf. Titus Mede II, murdered by the Dragonborn during the events in Skyrim. These assassinations sent shockwaves through history, toppled dynasties, changed the course of nations. But for every famous target, there were 100 others. Merchants who cheated the wrong customer, guards who accepted one bribe too many, lovers who betrayed their partners. These deaths, though insignificant in the grand scope of history, mattered to someone. The person who performed the Black Sacrament, who called upon the Brotherhood in their darkest hour, found closure through the deaths arranged by assassins they would never meet. This is the Brotherhood's true legacy, not the spectacular kills or the legendary members, but the thousands of quiet murders carried out over centuries, each one fulfilling someone's desperate prayer for vengeance or justice or simple relief. The shadow scales represented the Brotherhood's pinnacle, born under the sign of the shadow, given to darkness from their first breath, trained from childhood to kill without hesitation or remorse. They were perfect assassins because they knew nothing else. And when the tradition ended, when the last shadow scale stood alone in Skyrim with no one to replace him, it marked not just the end of a recruitment practice, but the end of an era. The sanctuaries themselves told a story. In the Brotherhood's prime, they had hideouts across Tamriel, hidden chambers beneath cities and caves deep in wilderness, each one a small community of assassins who lived together, trained together, killed together. They were families, bound by blood and purpose. The death of a sanctuary was not merely the loss of a building, but the destruction of that family, that bond. By the time of the Dragon Crisis, only one sanctuary remained, one cave near Falkreath, housing fewer than a dozen assassins, barely scraping by. And when that sanctuary fell, when the Penitus Oculatus burned it to the ground, it seemed like the end. But it was not the end. It never is. The Dragonborn rebuilt, not to former glory perhaps, but enough. The Dawnstar Sanctuary opened its doors. New recruits joined. The contracts came. And once again, the Dark Brotherhood operated in Tamriel, smaller but alive, diminished but enduring. This is what the Brotherhood has always done. Endure. Like the void itself, they cannot be truly destroyed, only forced to wait in darkness until conditions allow them to emerge again. Empires rise and fall. Nations war and make peace. Entire races face extinction and somehow survive. And through it all, in the shadows, the Brotherhood persists. The Night Mother remains, her preserved corpse a tether between the mortal world and the void, her voice whispering to those chosen to hear. Cicero, mad and devoted in equal measure, continues his duties as keeper, ensuring that the connection is never lost. The listener stands ready to hear her words and translate them into action. And somewhere in Tamriel, in a cellar or abandoned house or forgotten corner of the world, someone is performing the Black Sacrament, stabbing an effigy made from bones and flesh, whispering the ancient prayer, calling upon the Brotherhood to right a wrong that cannot be addressed through law or justice. Sweet Mother, send your child unto me, for the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear. The Night Mother hears. She always hears. And somewhere, an assassin receives a contract, a name, a location, a target. They gather their tools, plan their approach, wait for the right moment. And then, in darkness, when the victim least expects it, the blade finds its mark. Another soul returns to the void. Another contract fulfilled. Another prayer answered. This is the Dark Brotherhood. Not heroes, certainly. Not villains in any conventional sense. They are simply what they have always been. Instruments of death, servants of the void, acknowledgements of the one truth that unites all living things. In the end, we all return to darkness. The Brotherhood merely facilitates the journey. So close your eyes now, dreamer. Let the weight of this tale settle over you like a comfortable blanket. The Brotherhood story is one of shadow and blood, yes, but also of devotion and purpose, and the understanding that death is not an end, but a transformation. In the quiet of your rest, perhaps you will hear them. The soft footsteps in empty corridors, the whisper of a blade leaving its sheath, the murmured prayers to a mother who listens in eternal silence. And perhaps in your dreams, you will understand what they have always known, that fear of death is foolish, that the void welcomes all, that in that final darkness, we are finally, truly free. Hail Sithis. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of Tamriel, and you want to explore more of the Elder Scrolls' deepest lore, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. There are more stories waiting in the darkness, more secrets whispered in forgotten sanctuaries, more truths hidden behind smiling masks. Join us as we continue to explore the hidden corners of the worlds we love. Until next time, sleep well, dreamer, and remember, the Night Mother is always listening.